By the way, this is the next story I want to go on. You guys can help me out with this here to see if there's any kind of credibility behind this. So CNN reports the fact that Pentagon officials discussing how to respond if Trump issues controversial orders. And there was a secret Pentagon meeting. I don't know if there was or if there wasn't, but there's this clip here I want to play. And you tell me if there's any credibility behind this, if it's happening. Go ahead, Rob.
On discussions at the Pentagon. I don't know at what level this is. It just seems like it's informal discussions. I guess it's understandable they would have those discussions. It also, Scott, is it?
Look, I don't like this because what's Donald Trump supposed to think? You know, he's sitting down there, he's the president-elect, and now he's got to read in the newspaper tonight that the unelected bureaucracy of the federal government is having meetings at some level about how to thwart or countermand the commander-in-chief. I don't care if it's at the Pentagon or at the HUD or Ag Department. It doesn't matter.
This guy's a rock
the
star.
unelected bureaucracy of this government answers to the civilian and duly elected leadership that we just did. And what if you were in his shoes and you just won the popular vote with a clear mandate, and now you got to read that these unelected bureaucrats are plotting against you? What would you think if they have problems? If they have problems,
there's a reason to undermine the Constitution.
If they have ideas or things, they should call the president's office and say, "Hey, we'd like to have some discussions for planning purposes." But secret meetings that leak. Terrible way to get off to a start with the new administration.
Well, I agree that that's maybe not the best way to do it. However, Trump has set them up to be in this situation where they think that he's coming after them.
So what do you think this is really happening?
Of course it is. It happened in the first administration. It will happen again. Part of why I'm camping out here in South Florida for the next month and a half and move my whole family down here is to try to help any way I can. Look, you might hate Donald Trump. You might think that he's a terrible person, but you should never, ever justify the undermining of the United States Constitution just because you hate Donald Trump. And by the way, Donald Trump has a wonderful team around him. Let's say Donald Trump does something you don't agree with. We have a system of checks and balances. You don't like it? Well, then get Congress to do an inquiry about it. Get the courts to stop him. But it's not that you're not going to allow this super government of Pentagon to not fulfill the orders. That is, and by the way, there's a reason for it. No, that doesn't work that way. Because all of a sudden you're going to justify the undermining of the sovereign. He is the representation of the people in the government. And basically what the Pentagon is, for example, let's take one that they'll consider controversial on corporate media. What if Donald Trump wants to end the Russian war? Well, the Pentagon won't like that. But the American people, they want it. Public opinion polls, they want it. Donald Trump ran on it. He won a decisive victory on that. But the Pentagon doesn't like it. So who wins? A bunch of guys in the Department of Defense? A bunch of guys that have been there for 20 years in careers that think we should fight Putin for the next 100 years? Or Donald Trump who won a mandate? What you're looking at right there is a preview of the coming tension of who's in charge of the country. Is it the American people or the administrative state?
Now, so we get to this point of the analysis and we're all together, right? Smells bad. So what should be happening now? My concern is this deep state stripping out thing that's going to cause a huge legal nightmare that I don't want to cover, let alone live through. If Donald Trump does things differently this time, just in a way that he enjoys, which is addressing the nation, addressing the media, nation through the media, however he wants to do it, this time should be different for him in terms of how he discusses the ideas. He was very reactionary. Now, you can say, yeah, because you guys were attacking him all the time. Okay, fair point. He has the ability now, he hears about this story. He can tweet, I'm getting rid of all of them, right?
Well, honestly, Chris, he should.
But,
but secret meetings against
Okay, fine. Or you can still get rid of them, right? You can always do that. If he were to say they're having meetings about whatever the issue is, okay?
And we don't know.
And we think and say, well, here's what I want, and here's what you just said you wanted from me. I think if he speaks to the people more, and I'm not saying he doesn't do this, he likes to do this. I just think that he should be engaging on what he's going to do and less about how he is perceived.
Well, I think it's fair. I think that it was his tip. It
will defeat this.
But this clip we just saw was a hypothetical. Based on the reporting, they said the Pentagon is saying if Donald Trump issues something,
right? But you know what this is. This is an invested narrative of media that he is a danger to democracy.
Of course, and they're empowering unelected people against the people, the sovereign.
Or they're just running with something that makes them right about him.
But it did happen in the first term. It happened on Afghanistan withdrawal. It happened on a lot of different things where Donald Trump was routinely undercut by the national security apparatus against things he wanted to do.
Yes.
Can I give you another example? Mark Milley famously came out when he was under Trump, and he said, I back-channeled with China against the wishes of Donald Trump to try to prevent a war with China. Do you remember that story?
Yes.
That should never happen.
Yeah.
Generals do not command the U.S. military.
Yeah, I get it. And if you think it's well-intentioned, that's fine. But you got to resign.
It doesn't matter if you think, you resign.
That's right.
He's the president.
That's right.
Mark Milley is not. The DOD chief is not, because we have a structure. And why Donald Trump won is some voters, this wasn't a primary issue, but this was for me, that the whole structure the founders put together is completely in shambles, where the administrative state runs the country and the president goes and is like a ceremonial ribbon-cutting role. He kind of plays president, says hello, and you have this group of like 2,000 people that run the government. And that is the death of America if it continues.
Well, look, what you need to have is a top-down structure, right? But obviously you can't expect your president to do everything. There's a lot of delegation. There are a lot of people who are running the agenda through the lens of the ideas that he campaigned on. And both things can be true. He is the man, and if you have a female president someday, she is the woman, and the team is a reflection of them. But they do things. Rubio is going to be doing a lot of things that may or may not be exactly how Trump put it. Especially if he's smart about how he does his job.
Of course, but you can't undermine. That's a separate
issue. You can't undermine or leave.
I agree. If
undermine.
you have a problem, then resign and protest and go write a book.
That was my beef about Kelly, who's become like a hero to the left for all the stuff he said about Trump. My point is, and I knew what his argument would be before he made it, but it was, you should have been saying this stuff when you were in there.
100%.
And he says, well, but then they would have kicked me out and I couldn't have saved us. I don't buy it.
Yeah, and by the way, you are not tasked with saving the country from Donald Trump. The country wants Donald Trump.
Right.
And I have to go back to something. A popular vote mandate is very, very rare and very unexpected. And I don't care.
For a Republican.
Yes, that's what I'm saying. For a bunch of Democrats to stay at home, they say, oh, no, because Democrats. It doesn't matter. He won the popular vote and the electoral vote. The people want him. He won on the issues. He won despite all the propaganda. It wasn't like 2016 where it was a sneak attack. This was the most talked about expected election outcome, and people heard every reason not to vote for him, and they still did. And
Charlie, question. So when I had the president, he asked him a question. I said, so undecided voters. And he says, there's no undecided voters at this point. I'm like, okay, interesting. So when he say there's no undecided voters at this point, I think there's probably some, but I want to know, what do you mean by that? What? Let me ask the question. I really want both of you guys to give me your feedback. I'm going to come to you first. So was it more there is not undecided voters versus no? How can you activate this audience to come out and vote that they typically don't? It goes from 13 to 16%. How can I activate these guys that are like, yeah, I'm not interested in voting, to go out there and, like, I had Eddie Hearn on yesterday, one of the greatest boxing promoters of all time, right? And Eddie said, he had a fight where I'm like, what's the biggest loss he ever had? He said, there was this fight, I thought we were going to kill it. He says, it was a fight. It was one of the best fights for the 5% of super fans that actually follow boxing technically. But he says, not for the other guys that are just wanting to see a good fight, not the 95%. And he says, my job as a promoter is to activate you based on a story that I sell that you want to come see that fight, right? How much of it is undecided voters? How much of it is activating new audience that was going to sit this out to come out and say, oh, hell no, I'm going to come support this guy? Which one do you think it is?
So in election, there's two types of elections. There's persuasion elections, and then there's turnout elections. And turnout elections typically are midterms, or they are one-off and special elections. This is the first presidential election since probably 2016, but that was a different issue, where it was pure turnout, where there were because everyone really had their mind made up on Donald Trump largely. However, I disagree. There were still some late breakers and undecided people. I do think that pool was less than 2%, though. I think so. Donald Trump
2% is a lot, though.
And Donald Trump's campaign strategy, of which we helped execute on the ground in some of these states, was that, guys, don't spend your time knocking on doors about a suburban soccer mom who's weighing her options. Instead, because that takes 9 contacts to try to get her. 9 points of contact on average. Conversations, discussions, and they could be 30 minutes on it. Instead, turning point, go spend your time in very Republican areas where there are non-registered or what we call disengaged voters. People that like Trump, like his worldview. For example, the bro vote, right? And so this is where we spent our time, and we harvested, not ballot harvested, but we harvested in a very, very powerful way. At Arizona State University, for example, we registered thousands of young men to vote in fraternities. And that was way easier than us going to try to win over swing voters. And we did a little bit of that. But generally, the Trump campaign was brilliant because they threw the Republican consultant playbook out. The Republican consultant playbook was spend all your time on the middle, on those like middle 15% swing voters and go all in. Trump campaign said, why don't we just make our base bigger? Why don't we just make the people who love us the most? And so what they looked at was demographics. And they realized if we can make the electorate 3% more masculine, and by the way, they were so smart to do this.
This is Susie?
This is Susie and James Blair and La Savita. And they were so smart because they said, wait a second, what is more important than race? Whether or not you're a man or a woman actually dictates your political affiliation far more of a correlation than your race. So they de-emphasized racial politics and they emphasized more of a masculine machismo approach. And boy, did it work. And not only did it work, you're running up against a woman, so it's easier to kind of make that argument. And so I don't mean to monopolize the time.
But this is really interesting. Keep going.
And so what the Trump campaign then did, the Republican consultant playbook that Karl Rove basically authored was everything is about high propensity. So there's two types of voters, high propensity and low propensity voters. A high propensity voter is typically college educated, lives in the suburbs. You know, they watch Chris, they watch CNN, they have an income over $100,000 a year, they have 2 kids and a picket fence, and they go to soccer games and they don't commit crimes. You know, that type of demo, right? High propensity voters is where the Republican Party has always been focused. Okay, but Trump came in and he said, no, we're going to focus on low propensity voters. The welder, the electrician, the carpenter, the police officer, or the person that's just not registered to vote. Where I thought that Donald Trump was going to win, and I wasn't as confident as anybody else, okay, was when I started to see the voter registration surge across the country. In the summer before this last summer, new people that were registering to vote were registering at a clip 3-1 versus Democrat. In Pennsylvania, for the first time ever.
Wow.
In Pennsylvania, for the first time ever, we had every county in Pennsylvania, we were out registering Democrats for the first time ever. Now, mind you, what Josh Shapiro did as governor of Pennsylvania is he put in a thing called motor voter, which means you automatically get registered to vote. They thought that was going to help Democrats.
When you get your license.
When you get your driver's license. It helped Republicans because of lower, think about who's not registered to vote. It's typically lower propensity voters and PBD. Here's the kicker. Where do these people get their information? Lower propensity voters get information on TikTok. They're not watching CNN. They're not sitting. You know why? These folks are darn tired by the time they get home. They're not turning on cable news. They're watching NFL football games. They're the ones that are not going to be able to quote to you, Marbury. They're not.
Strategy.
By the way,
it's also this.
Yeah, it's also the phone. So what Donald Trump campaign did is they hacked the 2024 election, not in a way that people would think, where they said, wait a second, everyone has a supercomputer in the right-hand pocket. Why are we worried about what CNN is saying or MSNBC is saying? Why don't we win the information war? And then finally, the kicker, they said, why don't we go on the most ambitious, over-the-top, low-propensity voter communication strategy on Theo Von, Joe Rogan, Nelk Boys, Logan Paul, influencer strategies, right? And so what they said is there's this whole reservoir.
Freaking brilliant.
And the final kicker, my mandate at Turning Point was very simple. Charlie, turn Trump supporters into voters. And that's what we did.
Thanksgiving's around the corner. Christmas is around the corner. There was a moment that Kamala was uncomfortable saying Merry Christmas. She wanted to say Happy Holidays. Rob, can you play this clip? Go ahead and play this clip for the audience. Go ahead.
And when we all sing happy tunes and sing Merry Christmas and wish each other Merry Christmas, these children are not going to have a Merry Christmas. How dare we speak Merry Christmas? How dare we?
Okay, you can pause it right there. So guess what? I want to say Merry Christmas this Christmas. Very simple. And if you are confident enough to say it as well, we had a very deep discussion because not everybody that works here is Christian would say, listen, guys, we want to create merch that's very bold, that says Merry Christmas with maybe some scripture in it. Let's see if we have an audience for it. Pat, I don't know if it's a good idea and all this other stuff. That's what I stand for. You want it, great. You don't want it, I totally get it. But if you're watching this and you want to get a Merry Christmas hat, you go to Starbucks and you got the sun. I just want to see the reaction. You smile. You go to work, you got a Merry Christmas hat. You got to take that hat off, right? Hey, you want another hat here? You want some of the ugly sweaters that we have here, Rob? Can you show some of the stuff that we got here? You want to get some of the stuff for your kids, shirts, future looks bright, Merry Christmas gear is officially here. And if you're bold enough to do it and order it, and again, you place any orders of these, we're going to put some future looks bright ornaments in the order for you, limited edition custom that we have for the first 100 that place the order. If you're bold enough and you're comfortable going out there telling people Merry Christmas, and you're a valuetainer that believes the future looks bright, go place an order, and let's make some people uncomfortable or comfortable this Christmas with saying Merry Christmas. Having said that, let's get right into it. Charlie. And by the way, you can go to VT Merch to place the order. If you enjoyed this video, you want to watch more videos like this, click here. And if you want to watch the entire podcast, click here.